My alarm beeped loudly, waking me from my slumber. I groaned and lazily stretched over my double bed to turn off my alarm that sat on my messy bedside table. I then sighed deeply to myself. Another day of hell, or high school as it's normally known as. I pulled my covers off me and then got up to start my daily routine. I brushed my long and messy black hair and let it flow down my back. I applied some mascara, some dark eyeliner, and my favorite black lipstick. I like the color black. No, it doesn't mean I'm a goth or an emo. I just like the color. It's just me. Me is Josie Walker, by the way. After I brushed my teeth, I went back to my small box-shaped bedroom. I heard my mom and dad snoring from their bedroom down the hallway. My mom and dad worked at their antique shop, so they didn't work from 9 till 5, but they did earn a good amount. They didn't usually wake up to see me go to high school, and they don't know about the pain I get from it. I slowly got dressed in my dark skinny jeans that were ripped at the knees, my black t-shirt, and old black boots. I then put on my 4-skull and spike bracelets and leather fingerless gloves. I put my thin and simple black choker on, as well as my leather wriston and my nose ring. My hair was down at my sides, but I decided to put a fishtail braid in it to keep it out of my eyes. I'd probably get it ripped out by the stuck-up mean girls at my school. They all bullies me. Why? Because I'm different from them. I've grown up without many friends because I'm different. If human beings weren't judgmental, then my life would be a lot better. I walked slowly and almost aimlessly down the stairs with wishes that it snowed heavily, or there was a fire, or even the President of the United States had died. As long as I don't have to go to school, I don't care. I hated going to that school, Martin Spite High, that is. I had a good job at the retro record shop in town. I do archery with my Uncle Max and Aunt Scylla at their old country house for hours every weekend. I read a lot and I like to cook, and I sometimes go camping with my aunt and uncle as well. Because I did these things, school was useless to me. I'd rather be with them than sat in a classroom with an ancient and boring teacher, rambling on about some confusing math problem that I'm never going to use again. They all say that we'll use it one day. Bull. I'm not a mathematician, so get out of here. Sooner than I liked, it got to 7:30 a.m. I had to be at school at 9, and I lived just down the road from it. Time to set off, sadly. I grabbed my black backpack from the hall and exited my house from the back door, locking it. I live in a small row of terraced houses that sat in front of a good-sized farm. Around it, and my block of houses for miles is nothing but open and slightly overgrown fields. There is a main road to the next town about 40 minutes walk from my house, and a bus stop exactly opposite my house. But apart from that, I live in the middle of nowhere in the state of Washington. A lot of the kids, mostly the bullies, walk past my house to get to school, which, as you might think, causes problems for me. Speaking of which, as I was walking up the roads to school, a group of my bullies found me. "Hey, loser!" a high-pitched voice called as I walked. I sighed, trying to ignore them, but sadly they caught up to me. "Do you get your clothes from the trash?" a girl asked with a stupid look on her face. I shook my head, trying to walk away from them, but another one of them shoved me forward and I nearly fell. They all laughed and walked away from me. That was what I got. Little things like that build up inside me and make me want to cry and scream out. I tried to tell the teachers once, but they didn't do anything. They are just as stupid as the bullies. I got to school with a good 10 minutes to spare, but I sensed something was strange. Off even. I looked up from the ground to see that there were lots of police cars, some ambulances, and lots of people stood around the entrance. I frowned at the unusual sight, as it looked like there'd been a murder. Then I felt my mobile phone vibrate in my pocket. I took it out and saw that I got a text from my mom. It said, in capital letters, "Come home now, Josie." I stopped in my tracks and texted my mom back. "Why? I'm at school now?" She soon texted me back, "Just get home." I chose to listen to my mom because A, she's my mom, and B, I could avoid hell for a day. Putting my phone away, I turned around with a little smile of glee on my face to go home. That smile, however, disappeared when I saw that there was someone stood in front of me. It was a guy that looked like he'd been sleeping in the forest for a few weeks. He was hunched over and a lump of rotting blood. He stood like he was drunk a little, and also his eyes were pure white. No pupil or color. His skin was pale, and there was a nasty-looking wound on his neck. I frowned at the weird moaning and groaning noises he was making too. "Are you okay?" I asked him. He groaned then in a flash, grabbed hold tightly of my arm with his cold, grubby hand. I fought against him, threatening my arm, and he groaned more. Then he brought his yellow teeth down onto my shoulder. I screamed out in pain. "He bit me! What the heck?" I shoved him off me and he fell to the ground. "What the hell?" I yelled at him, and from behind me, I heard ear-splitting shrieks and cries of pain from the school entrance behind me. I looked to see that people were now screaming and running around like a load of mad people. It was horrific to look at. I wanted to get out of there now. I clutched my injured shoulder and started to stumble as quickly as I could. My head quickly started to feel like it was spinning around and around, but I was still aware of people rushing past me frantically and yelling "run" or moans along with screaming and a horrifying growl behind me. "Just keep going, Josie, just move," I told myself. It took me nearly 15 minutes to get to the main road. My school was on a lane that wasn't that long, but because of my injury I was a lot slower. Around me, I saw more people running from others that looked like the guy that bit me. That stupid biter. Beater. That's what I'll call them for now, because no person would bite people. "Josie?" a voice called. I turned my head weakly to look behind me, and saw my Uncle Max in his car, and someone that was his and my dad's friend Steve. "Are you okay?" he asked as he got out of his car. I shook my head almost lifelessly. "Whoa, dude." "She's been bitten," Steve yelled, and he pointed a handgun at me. I jumped back a little in shock. "Yeah, I got bitten from some random psycho ill guy, but I'm not gonna die." Uncle Max must have thought that as well, because he leapt in front of me and held up his hands in defense. "Steve, calm down, it might not be that recent," Uncle Max begged. "What the hell is he talking about?" "Not that recent?" I asked Uncle Max, confused. He sighed and turned around to face me. "When were you bitten, Josie?" he asked. "About 15 minutes ago, 20 tops," I replied. "It takes 10 seconds for someone to change. That's impossible for her to be bitten and not changed yet." Steve yelled back. "Steve, Josie's a good kid. She wouldn't lie," Uncle Max said, and Steve sighed deeply. "You're right, sorry, Josie." Steve apologized, and I nodded to him once. Normally Steve was okay with me and he was friendly, but right now he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Uncle Max, what's going on?" I asked as he helped me into the back seat of his car. "We're not sure, Josie. Right now we're gonna take you home, okay?" He told me and I nodded. Uncle Max climbed into the driver's seat and Steve got into the passenger. We then drove quickly to my house, and outside was my mom and dad cutting up wooden boards and hammering them to the windows. The family car was parked outside the small front garden as well. "Josie," my mom exclaimed, hugging me tightly. I hugged her back weakly. "Mom, I've been bitten," I said, and she gasped, then looked at my Uncle Max. "She's not turned," Max said, and my mom sighed in relief. "Turned? Come with me, Josie," my mom said, and she grabbed my arm and started to stride around the side of our block of houses to the drive that ran up the back of the houses, then stopped at a garage. On the left of the drive were the houses, and to the right were the large back gardens. Ours had some plants in it, and my old cat Mr. Socks was buried there. We went into the back door, and I noticed that there were some wooden planks on the windows. Mom closed the back door behind me and she hugged me again. "Mom, what's happening?" I asked, and she sighed. "Something really bad, Josie," she said, then picked up the TV remote. She then turned on the TV onto the news, and it showed scenes of mayhem and fear as people of all kinds were running from their cars in cities and towns from other people that looked like the guy who bit me. Also, there were unfocused shots of dead bodies lying open on the floor, and people screaming in pain and getting ripped apart and eaten alive by biters. Why the hell were they eating people? Authorities have reported that the infected part of the population have shown high rates of violence, causing riots and horrific fighting in the streets. Police and the army have tried to keep control, but are struggling to do so. We'll have word from the American government, who are rumored to be declaring a state of emergency, a female's voice stated over the footage. When she finished, my mom turned off the TV. "Oh my God," I whispered in pure disbelief. "Your dad and I went into town to get as many supplies as we could, and we saw people turning into these things," my mom began. "What things?" I asked, and she frowned but nodded. "These people were turning into monsters that eat people within 10 seconds flat, Josie. I timed it myself," Mom said, and took my hands in hers. "You haven't turned yet? You're a lucky one, Josie, somehow, but you need to be careful and stay safe," my mom said, letting go of my hands. She then strode from the living room to the hallway. "Where are you going?" I asked, following her. My injury didn't hurt as bad, but I still struggled to walk after her a little. "With your dad, Uncle Max and Steve, to get your Aunt Scylla and some more supplies. There's plenty of food and water in the cellar and kitchen, and you know where the weapons are. Stay safe, Josie. I love you," my mom said, and left out the front door, leaving me alone forever. They all died in a car crash coming back with my Aunt Scylla. I saw them with my own eyes as they drove back towards the house with at least 10 biters chasing them. I nearly broke down where I stood, but I knew I had to stay safe. It was the apocalypse after all now. I went to bed early that night. I checked the boards on the windows and put some furniture in front of the front door. I wasn't going to be using that door again. I turned all the lights off and locked the back door as well. The night was surprisingly quiet, though, thankfully. The next morning, I woke up at about 10 o'clock. I must have needed the sleep if I slept that long. Usually I'm up early. I got up and looked out the back of my house from my bedroom window. It looked the same as yesterday. Birds were chirping on the telephone lines and in the green leafy trees. There were some cars parked, except for mine, nearly on the drive too. A breeze blew slowly through the trees and on the plants of my backyard. My mom liked to grow flowers and some vegetables in the backyard. I suddenly felt my eyes tear up at the thought of my mom. I sighed and wiped my eyes, then walked down the stairs slowly. I opened the door to my living room, then looked around slowly. The room seemed so normal, so quiet, but my mind made it seem so hectic and loud because of what was happening outside in the world. I walked into the dining room, then peeked out the back window through the wooden boards that were there to protect the house. Nothing out there, zero. It was safe for now. I then walked into the kitchen to get my breakfast, which was just a couple of biscuits. I couldn't see much out the kitchen windows because they were well boarded up like the one in the dining room. My parents weren't planning on taking any risks. Well, then again, it's the zombie apocalypse, so people are going to have to take risks every single day. I finished my 2 biscuits from the fridge, then walked into the living room again. I wondered if the electric still worked, and if the TV stations were still running. I decided to find out. I got dressed in some dark skinny jeans, a black t-shirt, and Converse. I put my hair in a ponytail and got my black jacket that had a tight hood. I'm in the apocalypse now, so I can't wear the clothes I usually wear now a lot. I want to be careful of biters, as my mom called them. I was going to go out and check the cable and the satellite on the front of my house. To say I was terrified to be going outside was an understatement, but I knew that, like my parents, I had to be brave. I quickly went to my wardrobe and picked up a baseball bat that belonged to my dad. He put it in my room and told me to never be afraid to use it to defend myself, even if he did win the state championship with it when he was in high school. I'll miss my dad so much. As I was walking towards the back door, I checked what time it was. Jesus Christ, it was nearly 12:45. I spent a lot of time indoors. More than I like, if I'm honest. I was getting a little hungry. I would have to get used to that, so I'll skip lunch. I'm a strong girl, so I'll manage. I picked up my spare house key and placed it in the lock. Here goes nothing, I guess, I thought, and took in a deep breath. I slowly turned the key in the lock and then opened the back door, clutching the baseball bat in my other hand. I peeked out to look at my back garden. Nothing there. You may think I'm paranoid, but I'm just being careful. I could be killed at any time. I walked out of my door and looked around to check for anything, dead or alive. I then put my key safely in my back pocket of my jeans while looking back at my back door lock with a frown. Should I lock it or shouldn't I? I'm not going that far away, so it should be okay, I thought, nodding to myself. I then started to walk quickly and quietly while clutching the baseball bat in both hands. It was clear and safe so far. I walked around the back of my block of houses, then walked to the corner of the street. I looked up to the end of the other block of nicer houses to see that there were 3 abandoned cars, one that looked familiar, and some large blood spatters around. But no bodies, thankfully. I looked down my street, down the long road that leads to the next town. There were more abandoned cars, one that was my family's car, and blood spatters and a body near a car. It looked like a mess, even from all the way down the road. I gulped the looked up at the cable line pole and saw that it was not damaged in any way, and the metal box that was fine. I smiled a little at that, then walked down my street to the front of my house to get a look at the satellite dish. I stood in front of the gate that separated my miniature front garden from the sidewalk. I then looked up to see that my satellite dish was perfectly fine. Cool. All I needed at the electric to work, which I saw that the cables for it that ran over the nearby fields on either side of the road from my block were fine as well, almost as if they were normal. Just pray that somehow the hydro dam that gives electricity to my block, and the one next to it, and the farm behind my house still works. Good. Please say it still works, I thought, as I started to walk the way I came. I stopped in my tracks, however, when I heard the sound of low and lifeless groaning from behind me. My eyes went wide as I held up my baseball bat and slowly turned around to see that one of the kids that live on my street, that was in my year, was stood in front of me with blood around his mouth and on his hoodie. He looked at me with clouded gray eyes. I think that his eyes were brown, so to see them without any color was sad. "Oh my God," I muttered, as he groaned miserably. He took a few sloppy steps towards me, and I held up my bat in defense to him. "Go away," I said, threatening to swing. He tilted his head at me with his mouth agape lazily before he started to take more steps towards me with his arms up and flailing madly. I cried out in shock, then swung at me as I tried to attack me. He fell to the ground, and I saw that I broke his neck as I swung so hard at him. He lay on his stomach with his neck snapped back, still groaning like a monster in slight pain. But he was dead. Why dead can't feel pain, right? I looked around quickly to see if any more biters had come into sight. None, thank God. They might try eating the guy I just swung at. He didn't deserve to be ripped apart like the guy down the road near those cars. "I am so sorry," I said, then swung my bat at his head, smashing his skull. He stopped moaning or making any noises. I took in some deep breaths and cringed at the amount of blood that had spattered from his head. I then tapped his body with my baseball bat, but he didn't respond to it. Yeah, he's a good kid dead now. At least he's not suffering inside that monster anymore. But I couldn't leave his corpse near my house. It could attract more of them, and it would take too long to bury him. I looked over the road to see a fence that cut off the fields. That will have to do. Maybe his body would get decomposed eventually. I sighed and grabbed a hold of one of his arms. Then, with all of my strength, I tugged his body across the road as quickly and quietly as I could, which wasn't very much. "Come on," I groaned as I tugged his body. Eventually, I got to the fence, then put my baseball bat down on the pavement next to me slowly. I was a little nervous about that. I then put my hands under his attempts, which were just gross. "I don't know, I'm in the apocalypse and I'm scared, okay? Cut me some slack." Then heaved his body over the fence. He rolled down a small hill and he landed on his back. Phew, now that's over with. I'd best get back. He can sleep under the stars tonight. I grabbed my baseball bat, then jogged off back to my back door. It was quiet and there were no biters or anything, and I safely got back into my house. I locked the back door behind me and sighed in relief. That was emotionally draining. I kicked off my shoes, then pulled off my jacket, and left the baseball bat propped up against the small part of the wall next to the back door. That could be a weapon I use just in case of any emergencies. God forbid that happen. I then remembered I need to check if the electric still worked. I crossed the fingers of my left hand and put my right hand on the light switch. Please, oh please work, I hoped to myself. I then switched the light on and the kitchen was filled with light. Yes, yes! I cheered, punching the air in victory. I then flicked the light back off and dashed towards the living room and practically threw myself down onto the couch. I picked up the TV remote and started pressing buttons to get it to come on. The TV came on the usual channel we get the news on, but all that was shown on the screen was snow. That's it! I shook my head at the TV and flicked over the channel. That was also nothing but snow. I flicked it back to the news channel. The TV channels weren't working great. No! I complained, throwing the remote down next to me on the couch. I then sighed, holding my head in my hands. Day 1, and I've already killed my first biter for nothing. This is going to be horrible. I woke up on the couch the next morning at 9:30. I didn't change my clothes or go to sleep in my bed. Why? I was just too tired. I was also annoyed that the TV stations didn't work. I doubt they would be working this morning, so I just left the living room to go into the kitchen. The empty black plastic sachet that had I opened to get to my dinner, a microwaved lasagna, was sat next to the sink. I sighed and clicked up and looked out my door to see that my next-door neighbor was stood covering behind her door while talking to a guy with a black balaclava over his face and an assault rifle in his hand. He was yelling at the woman and threatening her as well. I frowned and picked up my door keys from the nearby counter and unlocked my front door. I also put my hand on the handle of a pistol that was kept by my dad among my mom's spice jars on a small shelf next to the door. I slowly opened it so I could see out but kept the gun close to me but pointed at the ground. I silently made it ready to shoot before I spoke to the guy. Hey, what's going on? I called and he swung around to face me. He pointed his gun at me with a shaky hand and I took in a deep breath. Who the hell are you? You said there was no one else here, lady? He yelled, pointing his gun to her, then to me again. I just asked a question. I began opening the door a little more. I don't want any problems, I said slowly, as he pointed the gun shakily at me. Just put the gun down. We don't have to get violent, I said to him, but he suddenly fired his gun at me. My neighbor shrieked and I ducked behind my door. I then looked to see he was pointing his gun at my terrified neighbor. Got to act fast, Josie, I told myself, then aimed my gun at the guy. Before he was able to shoot my neighbor, I shot 2 bullets into his neck. My neighbor screamed, and so did the guy in pain as he fell to the ground. I walked over to the 1.5-meter brick wall that divided our back gardens to see that he was dead and bleeding out all over the stone of the garden that he was stood threatening my neighbor on. I sighed in relief and looked up to see my neighbor looking at me like a deer in headlights. "Are you okay?" I asked her, and she nodded. Then from up the drive and around the corner came some sloppy footsteps and lifeless groans as well. I looked up the street to see that there were 4 biters, 2 girls, and 2 guys that were covered in blood and had bite marks on their necks and arms. They were walking, slowing over towards us. "Go inside and lock your door and don't come out until it is safe," I said quickly to her, and she frowned at me, then looked to see that biters were climbing, almost like drunk people, over her gate. She nodded, then closed her door silently, and I stood near my door watching. They started to devour the dead body of the guy I killed like ravenous wolves. I cringed at it and had to close the door. My stomach was churning, and I think I was going to be sick. I closed and locked the door, then slammed up against it tiredly. I sighed and sat on the floor with my head in my hands. I had killed someone. Well, he did threaten my neighbor and me, and it was the apocalypse now, so I'll have to get used to thinking like this. She nodded, then closed her door, silently, and I stood near my door watching as they started to devour the dead body of the guy I killed like ravenous wolves. I cringed at it and had to close the door. My stomach was churning, and I think I was going to be sick. I closed and locked the door, then slumped up against it tiredly. I sighed and sat on the floor with my head in my hands. I had killed someone. Well, he did threaten my neighbor and me, and it was the apocalypse now, so I'll have to get used to thinking like this. I'll deal with those 4 biters later, and I'll check the guy for anything useful. I got up off the floor, then walked up the stairs into the bathroom. The water had still been working, thankfully, and the toilet worked as well. I don't know how long that will last for, though. It was a few hours after I killed that guy, and I could see from my bedroom window that the biters had got bored and moved away. In my neighbor's garden was the bloody remains of the guy I killed. I can't clear the body with the biters still hanging around, so I'll have to go down and get rid of them first. I was nervous that more of them might come out and try and attack me, but I knew that I had to be brave and get on with it. So I got the handgun that I used before and my baseball bat as well. I then put my black hoodie on and went downstairs to the back door. I slowly unlocked the door and stepped out into my back garden. I closed the door behind me silently, then crouched down to hide from the biters in my neighbor's back garden. I don't know if they could see me, but I do remember that their eyes become gray and cloudy. Maybe they go blind. I took a few steps forward so I could watch him from the cover of my garden table that had white chipped paint all over it. I looked up to see that the biter that was closest to my neighbor's door had white eyes, and he looked horrible. As I started to debate which was the best and most quiet way to kill, he didn't stop and just crashed into the wall before he just kept walking into the wall. Ouch, surely that must start to hurt, right? Wait, he's dead. He doesn't feel anything. I sighed and shook my head as he still kept walking into the wall. Looks like I won't have to worry too much about killing biters in the future. Judging off this one, they seem dumb. With that thought, I quickly and quietly jumped over the stone wall, then crouched again, being careful. I then started to sneak up to the biter. I held up my baseball bat, then took a swing at his head. He groaned miserably and fell to rest against the wall, and I hit his head again, killing him. I sighed and moved his body to lie on the ground. Time to move on to the next one, I thought, standing up again. Within minutes, I killed the other 3 quietly and moved the bodies away to the same field I put the other corpse I killed yesterday. I knew that they were once humans, but I need to keep the corpses somewhere. I don't want them lying around and making the place look a mess. I put the gunman's remains with them as well, and that was truly disgusting because he was missing most of his organs and had blood still oozing from him. If he suddenly wakes up as a biter, I'm going to scream. By the time I finished moving those bodies, it was starting to get dark and I was getting hungry. I picked up my weapons that I left under my garden table, then went back to my house. I locked the back door behind me and put my gun and baseball bat back where they were before. I then got some sliced ham and cheese out from my fridge to eat for dinner. I need food tonight, and I ate in the living room they went to upstairs to go to bed early in my pajamas tonight. Day 2, and I've murdered a man and seen him ripped apart. Yuck. I was woken up by the sound of horrible crying and loud knocking on my back door early in the morning. I raced downstairs, then looked out the window to see my neighbor from yesterday looking like as white as a sheet with her hand on her neck that had blood coming from it. Help. I've been attacked by some of those things. She begged me distressed, and I nodded, then walked to the back door. If she had been bitten, I wouldn't have opened the door, but because she was attacked, I would see if I could help her. Where were you attacked? I asked her. She sobbed and raised a lazy hand that had blood dripping from it. Up the road, near some abandoned cars, she said, but my eyes were fixed to her bleeding arm. She's not bitten, is she? You've been bitten, I said, and she covered her wound with her other hand. Sighing, she slowly looked back up at me. I have, she said regretfully. I dashed back into the kitchen to grab my handgun. She could turn, then attack me, and I know I wouldn't want to be a zombie. No, please. She yelled, panicked, but I shook my head, pointing my gun at her head. I can stop it for you, I said, and she looked at me shocked. It's the apocalypse. If you don't want to be one of those things, then I can end it for you and prevent that, I told her. I would be heartless if I just shot her in the head without saying a word first. She shook her head again, meaning she didn't want to be one of the biters. Then suddenly she started to scream in pain. She then fell to the ground and started to jerk and twitch on the stone floor of my back garden with blood oozing from her mouth. I watched with a horrified look on my face until she eventually stopped moving, finally dead, choked on her own blood. I lowered my gun, then grabbed my baseball bat to nudge her. I tapped her twice with it, but she didn't move. Huh. So that's what it does to people to kill them. The poor woman, and she would turn too, unless she somehow damaged her brain while she jerked about on the ground. I turned around to go back into my house, about to put my gun down, but I heard some lifeless and undead groans from behind me. I slowly turned to see that the woman that just died was now stood drooping over with clouded, colorless eyes and the stench of fresh blood around her. She looked around aimlessly. She couldn't see me? Well, maybe that's good. She might not struggle when I kill her. I got a firm hold of my baseball bat, then took a step towards her. She jerked her head towards me when she heard the sound of my shoes touching the stone. Jesus, I barely heard that myself, and she was able to hear it from at least 2, maybe 3 meters away from me. She then tilted her head, listening more as I took another step forward. She then jerked her head so she was facing me directly, then made a hideous moaning noise. She lunged forward with her arms flailing at me. I yelped and swung my bat at her. It knocked her out of the way, and I was able to move back from her. She lashed out at me again with her hands, and I smacked them away from me with the bat. She then got on her feet again quickly, but moving like a drunken person on the city streets. Before she could attack me again, I pointed my gun at her head, then pulled the trigger. It hit her in the skull, and she fell to the ground in an instant. I sighed in relief, then put my gun away. I'd better get a silencer from my cellar because that shot made a lot of noise, and my dad told me if I want to be cautious with guns to always use one. I'd have to move the body as well. Man, was this going to become a daily thing? Or was I going to work for a funeral service in the future? Well, there wasn't really a future now, because the world had ended. I grabbed the arms of the dead body and started to drag it out of my back garden. There was a trail of fresh blood that came from where it first fell, and it was being created by me dragging it out. I then dragged it down the driveway and around the side of my block. I then dragged the body over the road and lifted it over the fence and placed it in the field with the other bodies. It rolled down the hill with a thump, and I looked to see that there were a couple of biters were feasting on the dead bodies. I cringed at them as they pounded on the fresh body I rolled down the hill. Ew, those bodies were there to be left alone, not to be food, I thought, then pointed my gun at them. I quickly fired 2 shots, 1 for each, killing them instantly. When they slumped to the ground, I saw that they were just teenagers. Well, teenagers when they were alive. I wiped my hands on my legs, then walked back quickly to my house. I locked my door behind me and placed my baseball bat and gun away in their right places. I then felt my eyes tear up and I burst into tears, slumping up against the back door. Day 3. And I've shot my neighbor and fed her body to biters. God. I woke up really late in the morning in the kitchen on the floor. Whoa, I fell asleep in the kitchen from yesterday. Oh well, I must have needed it. I got to my feet, rubbing my eyes, then looked out the kitchen windows. There were no biters around, thank God. I don't think I could be bothered with killing someone or something, then move the corpse of whatever it was away. I was just too drained today from yesterday. I was still in the clothes I wore yesterday that were really unclean, so I decided to get a shower and change clothes. I went to my room to get some clean pajamas. I couldn't be bothered getting dressed in clothes, plus I wasn't going out anywhere. Then I went into the bathroom and dumped my clean pajamas on the floor. I turned to the shower and stared at it a little. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna go and kill something. I placed a hand on the silver dial that controlled the water, then took in a deep breath. I slowly turned it on with my eyes squeezed tightly. The bathroom was then filled with the sound of running water as my hand turned to switch the shower on. Thank God, I exclaimed, letting the hot water run over my hands. It was like I was getting the greatest massage in the world just on my hands. The water felt that heavenly. I wanted to have that feeling on the rest of my body. I took off my pajamas and looked at my face in the mirror. I had lost some weight, from the lack of food at last, and I had some dark circles under my eyes. Also, the bite mark I had on my shoulder was scabbing over now, but it looked a little angry, and it could be infected. It didn't hurt me, but I did want to be careful. I'll get some medicinal cream for it after my shower. The shower itself. Man, it was heaven when I got fully in there. I washed my body quickly, just in case the hot water went off. I hate cold showers more than anything in the world. Sadly, that did happen, and the shower went cold. What? No! I screamed out loudly and turned it off. I groaned, stepping out of the shower to grab a towel. Then I heard something I didn't think I'd hear for a while. Hey! Someone there? A guy's voice called from outside. I could only hear them because the window was open. I groaned and looked out the window, holding the towel close to me. Outside, I saw that stood on the driveway as a middle-aged man and woman. The man had a rifle and a duffel bag over his shoulder. The woman had her back to me, but she did eventually turn to face her husband. My eyes went wide. She had in her arms, wrapped up in a blanket, a baby. A little baby. It was awake, but was really quiet while looking around curiously. It did that as its parents talked more. They did sound worried, and I think the dad was a little frantic. The baby, however, was calm. I pulled on my undies, jeans, and a t-shirt before I scurried down the stairs. I dashed quickly to the back door and unlocked it. Hey, over here! I called to them. They saw me and rushed over. Hey, oh my God. Thank you. They called trying to get in, but I put the door in front of them before they could. Whoa, I'm not giving you shelter. This is my place, I told them. The woman sighed. But we've been on the road for so long now, we need a rest. She begged. What about our baby? She asked, holding her baby close to her. There are loads of houses abandoned. Go live in one of them. The cops won't do anything about it. You are taking shelter, not stealing, I said to them, and the dad shook his head rapidly. Please, we need food, the man begged. I sighed deeply to myself to close the door. I could spare some food for them. I quickly grabbed a plastic bag from one of the kitchen drawers, then opened the cupboard and stuffed about 10 cans of food in it, with some bottles of water from the fridge. Outside, I heard the couple yell at each other. They must be under a lot more stress on them because they have a baby. Looking at its little face made me sorry for this family, and they didn't threaten me with a gun or anything. I was living on my own now, so I could spare some food. Hey, I called, opening the door up again. Their eyes darted to me and then to the bag I had. The woman's eyes grew wide, when took out some of the contents to show what I was giving them. I placed the bag on the floor, then stepped back on my back doorstep. The man frantically picked it up, and they both grinned happily at it. There's a baby shop at the edge of town, but be careful. There are loads of biters, I warned, pointing a little towards where the town was, and they both nodded. Thank you so much, the woman said, and her baby smiled cheekily at me. I smiled a little at it, then watched as they walked out of my back garden and out of my view back to the road. Day 4, and I've helped a family out a little bit. Nice to do something nice for a change. I woke up the next morning at around 9:30. For some weird reason, I struggled to get to sleep, so I had a pretty bad night. I got dressed in some old blue jeans, a black t-shirt, and some ankle boots. Today I was going to take it a little easy. I wasn't going to be sitting in the living room and watch the undead go past, though. I was going to go next door to my old neighbor's house to see if there was anything useful, e.g. food, water, medicine, weapons, maybe some clothes, I don't know. I'm not going to let Strange come and loot her house. If I did it, then the stuff would be looked after and wouldn't go far from her house. After I finished getting dressed, I walked slowly down the stairs and went straight to the back door. I grabbed my baseball bat just in case and my door keys. Quickly but quietly, I opened my back door, then stepped out, locking it behind me. There were no biters nearby, and I couldn't hear any of them either. Good. I jumped over the wall that divided our backyards, then went straight to the back door of my neighbor's house. I tried to open it, but it was locked. Oh, come on, I exclaimed in annoyance, then stepped away. I'm not going to her body to get the key. Perhaps it could be on the ground somewhere, I thought to myself, and started to search the yard for any kind of a key. I looked in between the stone flags that were placed all on the ground without luck. Sadly. However, something next to one of the flower pots caught my eye. I crouched next to them and my eyes went wide when I saw a small silver key. Yes, I exclaimed and picked it up. It had to be the one for her door. Keys don't grow on trees and they don't fall out of the sky. I clenched my fist around the key, keeping it safe in my hand, then stood up with my baseball bat in my other hand. From the other side of the small wall that marked the end of my neighbor's garden came a saddened and dead moan. I jerked my head up to see a biter stood hunched over with his bloody mouth wide open. My eyes went wide as he held up his arms, trying to get to me. He quickly stared at me, and I cried out in surprise and jumped back. He was moaning and hissing at me and still trying to get to me, but the wall kept him back. I sighed again, silently thanking the wall, and I held up my baseball bat. "I'm busy. Sorry," I said, and swung at his head. His skull smashed, and he fell to the ground with a thump. I then flicked off some excess blood from my baseball bat and turned to walk back to the door. The key fit perfectly, and after turning it in the lock a little, I finally got the door open. The kitchen was old-fashioned with pine wooden cupboards, an old gas cook, and a small white fridge that was slightly grubby. There were old tiles with flower bouquets on them around the white metal sink and cooker. The walls were a calm cream color, and the floor was wooden that was slightly darker than the cupboards. I didn't talk to my neighbors a lot, but I knew that she lived alone with her little dog. The dog didn't know where he was. Maybe I could find him and look after him. It would give me something to do, and it's the least I could do for my neighbor. I found a few plastic bags in a drawer next to the sink, and I filled them with as many tins and packets of food that I could find. I got lots of water bottles from the fridge and cupboards as well. I ended with 6 bags full. I carried them, 3 bags in each hand, with a happy and satisfied smile on my face. I turned to the door and was about to open it and leave when I was stopped by a smell. I sniffed a couple more times, then turned my head slowly to the left to see next to the hob and down to see in his little bed my neighbor's dog. Dead. He wasn't breathing or moving, and the smell was coming from him. I slowly turned the rest of me to face him, and felt tears prickle in the corners of my eyes at the sight of the little brown dog. He was only young and loved his owner so much. I couldn't help but cry at the sight of him like this. After crying for a little longer, I wiped my eyes and stood up again. I then decided that I couldn't leave him here. He needed to be buried because the smell of meat could maybe attract scavenging animals, and he didn't deserve to rot here. I got his place, a gray paw print blanket, and wrapped the little dog up in it. Then, carrying him in my arms, I took him outside. I hopped over the wall to my back door with the dog still in my arms. I unlocked my back door to grab my handgun and a small green trowel my dad kept in a drawer, then left again. As I walked with my hands full down my garden, I glanced up at the sky to see that it was gray and started to rain a little. I wasn't going to let that stop me. I walked out of the small metal gate at the bottom of my garden, then out to the garden of my neighbor. Like my garden, it went down a slightly steep hill, and that had plants and bushes on it, and grass at the bottom of it. That would be perfect for him to lie and sleep happy. I quickly started to dig with my dad's trowel, and had my handgun next to the dog wrapped up in the blanket. After about 5 minutes, it was 1/3 of a meter deep, when there was the sound of dragging footsteps and moans of a biter. I looked up to see it was an old female in a blouse and trousers. Her short white hair was blood-spattered and dirty, and she also still had her glasses on that were smashed. Some of the shards of glass here in her cloudy dead eyes. I sighed and picked up my handgun with my slightly muddy hand and aimed it at her head. I took in a breath, then shot a single bullet in her head. She fell like a rock to the ground, and it was silent again. I sighed and put my gun down on the grass, then rested on my knees and wiped my hands on my thighs, leaving dirt stains on my trousers. I then turned to pick up the dog, then place him into the pit. He was just a blanket bundle, but he was covered, which was important. I then slowly started to fill the pit with dirt again. As I worked, the sound of rumbling thunder was heard in the distance. The rain had started to pour down now, and it was splashing ugly onto my face and hands, giving me goosebumps and cold shots through to my spine. The freshly dug soil had started to become a little muddy, and it had become dark with the water. Soon I finished filling it in, and I carefully smoothed the earth over the top. I then stood up with my handgun in one hand and the trowel in the other. I then slowly walked out of my neighbor's garden and back to her house. I grabbed the bags and returned to my house. I nearly dumped them on the floor and started to wash my hands with loads of soap and warm water in the sink. I had to get my hands clean, I just had to. I eventually did get them clean after 10 minutes of scrubbing. Then I dried them with a dish towel and looked down at the food bags. Day 5, and I buried my neighbor's dog after I stole from her kitchen. I hope doesn't come back to haunt me. Next day, I woke up to the smell of death and dog fur. Then when my sense got in order, and after I rubbed my eyes, I remembered why I smelt like that. I stood and took a look out the window, seeing the fresh grave that I dug yesterday. It didn't look like any biters or scavenging animals had tried to dig at it, which meant it was deep enough. Today I didn't know what I was going to do. No one said the apocalypse was boring, but no one thought the apocalypse would actually happen either. No one said when it would end either. That made me wonder how long it had been since it started. As I lay on my bed, I realized that I hadn't been keeping track of how many days it had been since the world went to hell, and people started turning into monsters. I suppose I should be doing, just in case. I got up and lazily threw on my dark jeans and a blue t-shirt, then went downstairs walking with my feet dragging. It's funny how I found it hard to get myself up in the morning to go to school, but I find it even harder to get up now there are human, flesh-hungry monsters running around. I then looked out the dining room window thinking about how many days I've been in this apocalypse thing. Let's see. It started was that day I got bitten, and my family died. The first day was when I found I still had power but killed my first biter. The second day was when I killed that guy that tried to attack my neighbor. The third day was when I had to kill my neighbor after she got bit, which makes 3 days after. The fourth day was when I helped that family with the baby. The day yesterday, which was the fifth day, was the day I buried my neighbor's little dog. That makes today the sixth day. Feels like a lifetime with all the experiences I have had. I suppose I could get a wooden board or something like that and make a mark with a knife. It would be 1 mark for each day. And I was sure that I remember seeing something like that near my gate. Grabbing a knife from the kitchen drawer, I decided to pursue this idea. I opened my back door, checking for any biters around. Good news is there was none. I quickly strode over to my gate, looking around for the wooden board. Eventually, I did find it behind the bin, along with a rat chewing some rotten flesh that I have no idea came off of. Ew, I cringed as the rat scampered away. I then pulled a disgusted face as I grabbed the board quickly. I then moved back as the rat passed me with bits of flesh sticking out of its teeth and blood on its fur around its face. I made a noise of disgust, then walked away from the bins to my back door. I propped the board up against the small brick wall that was below the window that I looked out of in the morning, or whatever time it was when I came downstairs. Then, using the kitchen knife I took, I made 4 vertical marks and a diagonal mark that made a gate for the 5 days that have passed. Today was the 6th day, so I made another mark for that. It was a vertical, though. Then, sighing, I stood up and went back through the door. As I closed the door behind me, I wondered what I could do now. I hadn't looked out of the front of the house onto the street in a while. I couldn't get a good view from the front door, however. The only place I could get a good view of the road was from my parents' large bedroom window. Part of me just wanted to go and sit on the windowsill of the window in my parents' room. But part of me didn't want to go in. I haven't been in there since they died. I told myself that I had to do it because I had to see what was happening outside my house and if it was safe. So, with my feet still heavy, I walked slowly up the stairs and into my parents' room. I was hit with everything that reminded me of them. The king-sized bed that my mom would let me rely in the day if I was ever sick. The smell of my dad's cologne that he would wear loads on at the weekend we were going out. I laughed off the memory of my mom saying, "He's been throwing the bottle around the room again." On the walls left and right of the bed where my mom and dad's wardrobes stood. My mom's wardrobe was slightly larger than my dad's. She liked her clothes and she always looked nice without doing a lot. She didn't wear makeup a lot, but she never needed it. I nearly cried at the memory of when I was 12. And she put makeup on me for the first time. She said I was pretty. She always told me when the bullies told me I was ugly that I was pretty. "Pull yourself together, Josie," I told myself. Then a couple of tears fell from my deep blue eyes. Sniffing once, I strode over to the windowsill and plopped myself down on it. I looked out the slightly dust-covered glass window, seeing that there were a few biters stood around or walking along sloppily. Some of them were close to my house, and I felt a little insecure about that. Then I remembered a thing my dad once told me. He and my uncle sometimes would practice using a sniper rifle, and I even remember him saying he kept his under the bed. My head snapped over to the bed and dashed over, dropping to my knees at my dad's side of the bed. My hands searched under the bed, finding a large black case where his head would have been. I slid it out from under the bed and opened it, revealing a silver sniper rifle that had a scope and a black handle made of leather. It looked like it had been used only a few times before, which is a surprise. Mom was not a big fan of snipers. My dad was a good shot with almost every kind of gun, and he taught me to get a pretty good aim as well. I could also open up the window and use the sniper rifle to take those biters out. I picked up the gun and checked to see it was loaded with enough bullets to make a one-shot kill on each of the biters. I knelt in front of the windowsill, using it as a place for me to rest the gun on it so my aim could be good. I looked through the scope at the first of the biters. I took a deep breath in, then let it out. "Come on, Josie, you can use a hunter's rifle, okay? A sniper is just a little upgrade," I said to myself, then put my finger on the trigger. I aimed, then shot the first biter in the head. To my surprise, it wasn't that loud. Well, then again, I was used to using guns, and the biter I shot in the head dropped back and onto the ground. Some of the other biters twitched at the sound of the biter falling to the ground, but they didn't move any closer to it or my house. I moved to aim at the second on. Bang. The third on. Bang. Fourth. Bang. Fifth on. Bang. I sighed when I finished looking out, seeing that the street was now a graveyard. My dad would have been proud of me, but my mom might have not have been. I shut the window again, then kneeled in front of the black container that had the sniper gun in it. As I put it away, I decided in my mind that I wouldn't go out and move the bodies. It would be kind of smart to leave them there to make it look like everywhere else. Abandoned. I hadn't forgotten about that guy that I shot that tried to rob my neighbor. I learned that day that there were now even more dangerous people in the world than before. I also learned that on day 6 of the apocalypse, I'm an American sniper. Pun not intended. I slept in again this morning, and I slept on the floor of my parents' room. I nearly looked up in my parents' bed expecting to see them snuggled and snoring under the covers, but reality made me stop and remember that they were dead. Sighing deeply, holding my emotions back, I heaved myself to my feet. I looked down at the corner of the bed where the rifle was tucked under. Memories of what happened yesterday with the shooting ran through my mind, and then I remembered that I had to move the bodies of the biters I shot. Oh well, I guess I still have to work in the apocalypse. I dragged myself down the stairs, then to the back door, grabbing the handgun from the kitchen and my baseball bat. I checked the ammo on the gun and saw that it was low. Where did he keep the ammo? I asked myself, referring to my dad. I thought about where he would maybe keep it, then thought it must have been downstairs in the cellar. I hadn't been down there in a while. It would be the first time I go down there since this all started. There wasn't any other place I could think of where he'd keep the ammo, and in the cellar would seem like the best place. Grabbing the handgun, I stepped to the door of the cellar, then I flicked on the light. It shone light up the cold and musty cellar and made it easier to walk down the steep stone steps that lead to the low ceiling and highly stocked cellar of my house. My eyes wandered along the endless shelves of food, water, and other supplies as I looked for the ammo. Eventually, I did find bullets I was looking for that fitted my handgun. They were hiding in a little blue box in a group of 6, which I took and loaded them into my gun. I then left the cellar back onto the kitchen as quickly as I came down into the cellar. It had a bit of an unsettling feeling to it, which could just be my mind messing with me. And it reminded me a little of the time I watched PewDiePie play Amnesia. I wonder if he's alive in this apocalypse. Well, then again, I didn't know if the whole world had flesh-eating monsters roaming the streets. It could just be in my state for all I know. But I think help would have been sent by now if it was just my state. Don't be so stupid, Josie, I told myself, sighing as I closed the door to the cellar behind me. I then grabbed the baseball bat again and my key as well. I slowly unlocked the back door, then walked out, shutting it quietly behind me. The air was a little cold today and it was still. I looked over at my neighbor's door and swallowed, still feeling bad about her and her dog. I then strode out my garden and up the driveway to walk around the block and onto the main road. There weren't any live biters, just the bodies of the dead ones I shot with my dad's sniper rifle. Those were the ones I were going to start now to move over the fence to the pile of bodies that was building up. I realized that having a load of dead bodies around may encourage Proper to steal. Might think there's no one around because they are all dead. I dragged the first of the bodies to the fence, then moved it over the fence quickly. Then I did the same with the next one, but I struggled to get it over the fence this time. Whoever this guy was when he was alive must have been a bit on the chubby side. The third body I dragged using only one hand because it was a female. That was probably 18 or 19, so therefore weighed a lot less. I threw it over the wall and watched it tumble and land with a thump. The fourth body I grabbed by the shoulders but regretted it immediately because chunks of rotten and gnawed-away flesh came off in my hands, splashing my hands and clothes in stinking blood. I cringed in disgust and cried out in pain when I fell back, landing on the hard road. I threw the flesh away from me, making it land on the other side of my street, then flicked my hands to remove any excess blood from them. They were stained with brownish-red blood, and my fingers' nails were grubby underneath as well. The smell of my hands and the body made me want to vomit. "Come on, Josie," I began to tell myself, then got to my feet. "You've beaten the brains of your undead neighbor, kinda helped a young family, and shot a thug. You can do this." I regained myself, then grabbed the body again. I heaved the body using all my strength over the wall to let it drop with the others. I sighed and rubbed my hands on my knees, leaving them with mucky bloodstains. Then I turned on my heels to the last body and wandered over to it. I don't know what this job was called that I did, but it wasn't nice, I thought to myself. and sighed again as I crouched next to the last body. Placing both hands in the shoulders, I slowly and carefully this time turned the body into its back. But if I'd have known what I would find when I turned it over, I would have just ran right back to my house. Holy God, I exclaimed, and scampered back away from the body like it was a murderer pointing a gun at me. I shook my head with a look of horror on my face. This body that I shot before, was once one of the kids that bullied me. Holy God, I repeated and rubbed my face before held it in my hands. If I've ever seen her dead, I would have probably done a victory dance. But not even she deserved this. She and everyone else thought that she was special, and would have guessed her as being the one who would survive this apocalypse. Not even me. But that's how it is. Her grayish blood-stained skin stood out against her knotted blonde locks and ripped designer clothes. Believe it or not, she used to be pretty before her face got eaten by biters. I never knew why she bullied me. But I stand by what I said before and say that Danielle didn't deserve this. I know we didn't get along, but I'm sorry, I said, before I began to move her body over the fence and then let it drop in the pile. It lay there in its side in a floppy and broken mess, and I felt even more pity for her and the rest of the bodies that were once people on the pile. But then I thought to myself that in the world I was in pity would be weakness. I couldn't let those bodies pile up because they'll haunt me and drive me mad. I need to get rid of them once and for all. Flaring my nostrils as I took a deep breath in, I strode up my road to the unfamiliar cars that were scattered around the road, abandoned by their probably dead owners. I still gripped my baseball bat as I stood at the trunk of one of the cars. I then raised my bat above my head and brought it down, smashing the trunk. Thankfully, the car didn't make any alarm noises as I brought the bat down again and again, until finally the lock on the trunk gave way to let me open it up to reveal a couple of boxes. One had some clothes with some food and water, and the other had some tools and what I was looking for. A can of bleach and a lighter. I didn't have a lighter on me because my mom didn't trust me with them, believe it or not, and I didn't want to go back and find it in my house. So I decided to yank off a shred of material from the bottom of my shirt to burn after I jumped over the fence to empty the bottle of bleach over the pile of bodies. I did that quickly, then threw the container in it as well, before I flicked open the lighter and created an amber flame that made the bottom of my shred light up. Pleasant dreams, I said, then threw it onto the pile, making it all light up in seconds. I know that pleasant dreams sounded a little psycho, but it's all I had, and that's what I believed happened when you die. You just go to sleep. A nice long sleep. I watched in silence with small tears in my eyes as the flames ate up the bodies for at least 10 minutes before I decided it was best for me to leave it. Turning around while inhaling a deep breath, I left with the image of the fire stuck in my mind and glimmering in my eyes. Day 7, which I marked on the calendar I made yesterday, and I was now the only person that went to the funeral of a few dead people that some I never knew. I went to sleep late last night, so that meant sleeping in the next morning. The smell of burning flesh haunted me like a phantom and kept me up a few hours. I woke up early, though, again at 8 a.m. I changed my shirt to a blue one and put fresh undies on, then started my daily end-of-the-world routine, which was check for biters at the front of the house and out the back. Make another 2 knife marks telling me that the world has been like this for just over a week now, and it's already hell. After I did those jobs, I ate some yogurt from the fridge that was about to expire, and had a drink of water from the tap that thankfully still worked. With a glass of water in my hand, I stared out the kitchen window at the house next to me. Images of Music Dead neighbor popped into my head, and that then led to images of her little dog popped into my head, making my eyes tear up. Then the image of the burning pile of corpses appeared in my mind. The ghostly smell filled my nose, and it made my stomach churn. I gagged and spun around to the sink and threw up the contents of my stomach again and again. I spat up green vomit and coughed a few times, but when I finished, I sighed deeply. I cringed at the foul taste in my mouth, but it did distract me from the images that haunted me before. I emptied my glass of water in the little plant that was on the kitchen windowsill. I didn't want to waste it by pouring it down the drain, and the plant looked thirsty as well. My mom bought that plant a couple of months ago, and she always forgot to feed it. Who knows? You could one day be the last plant on Earth, I said to the plant while I stroked its fragile green leaves. Memories of my mom came to mind, but I held back my tears, wiping them away with my thumb. I sighed deeply, then threw my yogurt container away into the trash and walked back through my house and up the stairs to my room. My feet dragged and my shoulders slumped. I didn't want to do much today, so I sat on my windowsill of my bedroom, hugging my knees with my chin on top of them. I looked out at the silence of the day, seeing that the morning was grim. It was drizzling, and the sky was gray with thick clouds. My eyes went to the bloodstains that were on the stone ground of my neighbor's backyard. My neighbor, the thug that tried to rob her, my neighbor's little dog, and even the biters I killed in her backyard all flashed in my mind. I felt sad for my neighbor and her dog, and a little for the thug I shot, but I felt none for the biters. Yeah, they were people too once, but when they turned, I suppose, they became monsters. My eyes glossed over with tears, but I immediately wiped them away. I thought I cried a lot when I got bullied, but apparently I was wrong, as I cried more in the last few days than I had a month at school. I wanted to stop crying, and I wanted to stop feeling sad. And to me, there was only one way to do that. And as strange as it might sound, getting rid of those bloodstains. I don't care how I do it. I need to get rid of them. I got to my feet quickly, sniffing and wiping my nose, then dashed down the stairs to the kitchen. From the sink under the cupboard, I found the mop bucket, a scrubbing brush, and some detergent liquid. I also got some rubber gloves to put on my hands because O didn't want my hands getting too dirty. I'll be even sadder and cry more if the blood is haunting me on my hands. With that thought in mind, I pulled on the gloves and stood up, putting the mop bucket into the sink. I squirted some detergent into it and ran the hot water tap to fill up the bucket. I watched the bucket fill up and bubbles form on the top with cold tears smearing my cheeks. Why was I still crying? Why was I crying at all? I thought to myself, but I ended up crying more. I soon turned off the tap, then picked up the bucket, which weighed a ton, and scrubbing brush, then stepped to the back door. I picked up my keys and opened the door. More tears fell down my cheeks, but I didn't care. I unlocked and opened the door, then picked up the bucket and brush again and walked out, not bothering to check for biters. I strode quickly out of my backyard, then walked the small distance to my neighbor's garden gate. I kicked it open with my foot, then walked in, and dropped to my knees next to the first of the bloodstains. My eyes had tears flooding out of them, and as I started to scrub at the blood with the brush, they dropped off my cheeks and fell onto the stone ground. I scrubbed harshly at the bloodstain, washing away the haunting images and memories it brought me. From my eyes, tears still came, and from above me came the rain tumbling down in large droplets. My tears mixed with them a little, and it washed the bloody soap away down the drain at the side of my neighbor house. I moved to another stain that was smaller but just as deep and started scrubbing almost violently at it. The gray clouds above my head and the sky gathered more, and there was a clap of thunder. I kept scrubbing, feeling sweat build up on my neck and my forehead. The gloves were getting coated in the blood-filled soap, and they stunk of it. But I had already thrown up today. Soon I got the second bloodstain out, and I just had one left. I started scrubbing the last stain with my tired arms, but I grit my teeth and kept going through the tiredness and the tears. It was a flash of lightning followed by a roaring clap of thunder that made me jump back and nearly knock the bucket flying. It was raining down heavily now, and I felt a little uneasy about it. I looked down at the ground, seeing that my work had paid off and that the rain was washing the bloody soap away. I didn't care where the soap ended up. I just don't want to see it again. I soon stood to my feet, wiping my eyes on my forearms, and sniffed. The rain had clouded my vision a little. I was now getting drenched and extremely cold. I picked up the bucket with the brush inside, then jogged out of my neighbor's garden, down to my garden gate, and back into my kitchen. I dropped the bucket and scrubbing brush into the sink, then ripped off the rubber gloves that were sticking to my skin a little and covered in bloody soap. Sadly, that brought back the ghostly images of the dead people that left the blood behind. I found myself bursting into tears again, and I sank to sit on the wooden floor of the kitchen, hugging my knees and crying into them. After a few minutes that honestly felt like hours to me, I lifted my end to stop. I was a wimp and had no right to say that school was hard, then cry about it. This was way worse, and I didn't know how much more I could take. No, don't think like that, Josie. You need to be strong, I whispered to myself. I shut my eyes to clear my mind while I took in some calming, deep breaths. I looked up at the countertop in front of me to see my handgun placed silently on top of it. But to me, it was speaking 1,000 words. That object right there could end me. But do I want to die? No! I snapped to myself angrily, then hit myself with a clenched fist on the head. You're not going to do that, Josie. Stop! I yelled at myself and rested my head in my hands. Mom and Dad wouldn't want you to give up, I whispered to myself. Some more silvery tears trickled off the end of my nose and onto my jeans, and I sobbed again for a few more seconds. However, after yelling at myself, I realized that I couldn't give up. I heaved myself to my shaky feet and wiped my tearful eyes on my hands. I then lifted my head to look out the window. It had stopped thundering and lightning, but the rain was still going pitter-patter against the window from falling from the murky, gray skies. The sound was kind of calming, though. It stopped me from crying anymore and made me pull myself together. Day 8, and I nearly had a mental breakdown.